lunch? Katie, do you have your lunch with you?
I do.
Yay. I have my lunch. Hi, hi. Okay, we are almost. We're almost in the other group. Hi. Hi, guys. Tell me if you're live, if you're joining, where you're from. Say hi to me. I'm Stephanie Waite, a licensed professional counselor, and Katie here. So I'm going to see if I can get Katie to come up on the screen. Hopefully she's showing up. Hi. Yay, there she is. Hi, Katie. Yes. Someone is joining us from the UK, Cincinnati. We've got Texas, Scotland, Western Mass. Facebook, if y'all can't hear me or Katie, will y'all let us know? So I've got my phone here to ask questions for my TikTok friends. We've got Katie here who's gonna just hang out while we eat, and we've got Facebook, so I might not be looking directly in a camera because I'm trying to get all of our questions and things going on. So we've got a lot of people from Texas. Katie, where are you from?
I'm in Texas.
Katie's from Texas. Have you always been from Texas, Katie?
Oh yeah, born and raised.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Born and raised Texan too. I did live in Chicago for a while. While I went to graduate school.
That's my dream place to live.
Katie just said her dream place to live is Chicago. Why?
I mean, I went there last year for like a month and lived downtown, and I was just like, that's the first place I've ever visited where I was like, okay, I could see myself doing this like full time. And I was there in March, so it was like really cold.
Yeah, but it's still really nice that time of the year.
Oh yeah, I walked everywhere I went. It was awesome.
So she is talking about Chicago. She visited, and she said she could live in Chicago. So do I have any Chicagoans, Illinoisers on the line? Chick-fil-A for lunch today. That sounds like a great place to get lunch today. It's a good thing it's not Sunday. Okay, so we've got some folks here on TikTok from Indiana, Florida. So we're here to talk. I guess we're going to keep it light. We're going to keep it chill, but we want to answer some questions. The whole reason I go live is, Katie, was your experience that when COVID hit, support felt hard for people?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. Yes, you can ask a question. Go ahead, Katie. Why? What did you see happening?
I'm following the live on TikTok.
Oh,
so
cool. Yes.
People ask questions. I mean, my caseload went up when COVID happened, and I thought it would go down because I was like, people aren't going to be able to afford, therapeutic resources, or I just thought, well, people get to spend more time at home and maybe like sleep in when they haven't been able to, and like I bet people will get like a little bit better and like less stressed. And I did see that with teenagers. And it was because they were like, yeah, I'm kind of like, it's awesome that I'm not having to like walk down the halls in school right now, or like get peer pressure from other people, or have to like eat in the cafeteria.
Right.
But I did see a lot more struggles with the adult population. I'm at home with my spouse.
Right.
We're not used to being around each other much.
Right.
And I'm like, well, that's totally like viable, because I don't think we're supposed to be around one person that much.
Right. Someone says here they've been struggling a lot with behavior since quarantine. And I think what I've heard is, yes, everyone is struggling. People in recovery, I should say, have been struggling since being in quarantine. for a lot of different reasons. Like Katy was just saying, right? That I'm stuck at home with all of my people, all of my family. I can't get out of my house. We're all, in the same walls, and my house is feeling smaller and smaller. The lack of my structure, the lack of my routine, threw off feeling safe around eating too. I think another thing I heard was people feeling like worried about access to food and access to safe foods, because when it first hit, people stormed the stores and bought up a lot of stuff. And so access to food and food insecurity are huge traumas for eating disorders too. So quarantine hit our folks hard, and we did both get busy when COVID hit, for sure. Someone wrote here, Megan 655692, I lost all of my structure from quarantine, and I have no routine, and it makes it hard. And absolutely. And I think Katy, I'll ask you for a tip too. I think the tip that I'm sharing is that establish some kind of routine for yourself. In quarantine, we can be, I think, a little more flexible. Perhaps it depends on, I know some people didn't get to work from home, but you want to set up some routine for yourself, right? So you're going to make sure you get up at a certain time, schedule lunch, schedule some breaks, schedule dinner. It's not always fun to live super scheduled like that, but if you feel like you've lost that structure, set up a routine for yourself. Katy, what about you? What's the tip for you for like struggling during quarantine?
So I'm wondering if I can actually share my screen.
I wish you could.
Okay. So if anyone wants to see what I'm talking about, maybe just
let us know. Let me know. DM me or something. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys can email me as well. I'm at Katy, it's Katy at texomaspecialtycounseling.com. But something that I've done as of late, because I started feeling some effects just this past week and a half, where I was just like, I am not feeling like I'm taking care of myself in all of the different arenas that I need to for me to feel like a complete whole person. And I'm one of those people that likes crossing things off in person. So I created a chart, which that's what I would be happy to share that with anybody, on a Google Drive, and it has a column for mental health, so my own mental health, and that's usually 20 minutes of reading a day. Right now I'm reading The Body Keeps the Score, which all of y'all should read.
Right. Yes.
And next one was physical health. So even if it's something like my boyfriend and I did 12 minutes of yoga the other day. What now?
I'm just talking to somebody here. Keep going. You're good.
Okay. Yeah. And just very little things like that, where it's okay, I got out, a little bit of energy, stretched out my legs, just did, there's even yoga that's in a chair or lying in bed, and it's, very accessible. It's not too difficult.
Yes.
And then I have other columns that plan out my food intake. So it's okay, for breakfast on this day, I'm going to probably eat around 10 a.m. And then I plan out oh, I'm going to do takeout for dinner on Wednesday night, or I'm going to make a pizza. And then it's I have a professional column where I'm I want to do 10 minutes of professional development a day. And so, I ended up feeling last week so much more taken care of, because I was attending to not only feeding my physical body, but my mental and emotional side as well.
Right. Yes, you got to take care. Wellness is about taking care of all aspects of ourselves, right? And so Katy was speaking to scheduling time for wellness activities. What's something I can do professionally for myself today? What's something I can do for myself emotionally today? What's something I could do for myself mentally today? What can I, make sure that I have my food meal scheduled in here. So a question that came up from Starry Bree is, what are some good timestamps for eating snacks? So I want to say, I'm not a dietitian. Katy's not a dietitian, and I really struggle with giving people like food advice, because especially like those with eating disorders, rules become so important, and I don't want someone to hear me say, you know, well, this is when you should be eating your morning snack, right? So I think that a good timestamp would be to ask yourself, have I eaten in the last 3.5-ish hours, right? That's a good way to know, hey, it's time to go nourish my body. Because I hear this all of the time, and Katie, I bet you relate to this too. I hear people say, yep, I woke up late, so I missed my breakfast, which means I missed my AM snack. And so then, you know, then you feel really like pressured and in your head and beat yourself up because you missed your meal plan for the day, right? Well, recovery is about not having those time rules, that if I wake up at 11, okay, yeah, my body's been fasting now for a long time because of sleep. I need to eat something as soon as I can, but that's starting kind of my day, right? To just feed my body throughout the day, knowing that it's okay to eat every 2.5-ish, 3.5 hours. Katie, any thoughts on that for you, a timestamp for snacks?
Yeah, I always recommend to my clients that even if it's something small, because that is a big concern right now with some of my clients, is that they're like, okay, well, sometimes I'll stay up till like 9 a.m. working and then get up at 11 because I don't have to be anywhere, and I'm like, and that's fine. We can work around that. The whole point of like recovery, being recovery minded, is to be flexible.
Right, flexible. Right.
Right. So when someone wakes up at 10 a.m., which I have done, it's like, it's not quite breakfast time, not quite lunchtime, but again, like, let's, throw the rules out a little bit, because those become they become so regimented, and it's easy for us to start obsessing. Like anyone with that eating disorder brain, I can relate because I'm in recovery from an eating disorder. So it's like, I know how your brain filters information, and those rules are like, ooh, another thing to be like obsessive about.
Yes.
So I always tell people, like, even if it's something like a small, like, mid-morning snack, and again, we are not dietitians, I cannot speak to like your specific meal plan. It's like, okay, well then, like, sometimes for me, I'm like, I'm gonna eat like a Chobani yogurt cup with some granola sprinkled on top. Is that a full breakfast? No, but I'm about to have lunch. So it's all about that.
No
flexibility.
Rules. No rules.
Right.
I love that you said the eating disorder brain, right? Y'all, let's never forget, eating disorders are a disease. It is not because you chose this path. There's not because you deserve this path. There's not because you are worthy or, have screwed your body up after all these years of dieting, right? It's none of those things. Eating disorders are a disease, and it does truly change how your brain filters information. The information that's allowed in and the information that you put out. And so I tell clients a lot, I don't want you to trust that eating disorder part of your brain, because it's always a skewed, distorted narrative anyway. And so I think for those of you here on TikTok asking me, how do I recover? What do I do? I think that's a step in recovery, is learning to recognize, what is the eating disorder telling me? What are those lies and those messages and that story? When you can start to identify that, I then say, talk to it like it's a symptom, right? So would you get, like, that's a symptom of your disease. How do we treat a symptom? Right? We take care of ourselves in that moment to address that symptom. So, Katie, I've got a lot of questions coming through. So first of all, great job. So many of you on here are eating right now a meal and a snack and sharing that it feels really scary. We have people eating fear foods right now, which is like really brave. So thank you. Yeah, Katie gave you a little woo. That's amazing. So great job. And even if you're like I don't know if I can eat right now. Guess what? You're showing up and you're listening to two folks chat about eating disorders and recovery. So we're going to give you, a round of applause for taking that recovery step too. So, okay, this is a good question. A lot of you are asking, how do I not feel guilty after I eat? How do I feel, how do I not feel bad at the end of the day? So, Katy, thoughts on how to not feel guilty when eating or after eating something?
Yeah. And I don't know if this is like a good time for you to restate, like in case people are new, like onto the TikTok thing, but like if they can't hear me, then just go on over to.
Yeah, so if you can't see or hear Katy, because TikTok's the only way we can't like make it all work, but I have Katy, who's an eating disorder therapist friend, associate of mine. She's here with me and we're hanging out, eating lunch together. You can check that out on the YouTube channel and or the Facebook page. So if y'all want to like hear her, see her and all of her fabness, go there. So thank you. All right, so tips on feeling guilty after eating or during eating or while eating.
For sure. And I think a lot of those, I think it's super important to keep working like with your treatment team to build up that self-awareness of like, why, like, is it guilt really, or is it like a discomfort? Like, is it anxiety? Is it like physical, like nauseous? Like, what is really behind that guilt? Because guilt is not like the first feeling that comes up. It'll be like, I'm super anxious about having to finish this meal, or I'm super anxious about the potential weight gain or weight loss like that's going on in my body right now.
Yeah.
So just being like super self-aware of like, okay, and that takes time, by the way.
Right.
No one ever will expect you to be like, oh, I can totally chart out logically what I'm thinking. It's like, no.
I know all of my feelings and they're all so known and we feel so comfortable with each other. Hell no.
Right.
No way. Right.
So that does take a lot of practice, which is the whole point of therapy, where you can maybe, like that's something I had to do back in my day of like talking things through with my therapist and dietitian to be like, okay, I went to a restaurant, I ordered this, I felt super anxious when this came to the table, and like really charting out, and then they can help you chart out like what was going on in your body at the time. So anyway, if it is super anxious, like while you are eating or afterward, that is where those distress tolerance and like grounding skills really come into play. For me, it was like the really deep, like diaphragmatic breaths, because it would help like settle my stomach. Because for me, anxiety presents not so much in the heart racing, but like in my stomach. I would be like, I'm physically ill trying to finish this meal.
Right.
Or I'm physically ill thinking about the fact that like it's snack time, not a meal time. Like I was so scared of being hungry, and I was so scared of being full, which is super common with eating disorders.
Yes. So true.
So yeah, I think it's practicing those skills either like with your therapist, with your dietitian, and finding out what works for you and what doesn't. Some people will have like a tactile thing with them, like at the table, where it's like they can, rub something or like smell something, and it's like, okay, I'm taking deep breaths. I can get through this, because if you think about it, like you've survived 100% of your hardest days already.
Yes, exactly. I had this conversation too with somebody that when you are in the recovery process and you're letting go of like food rules and your head starts to lie to you and tell you, body dysmorphia really picks up during, I think, that time. And it feels like you can't, right? Like there's this voice and this anxiety that's saying, no way, you can't do this. This is bad. This is wrong. Just because something feels uncomfortable doesn't mean it's bad, right? Sometimes a novel situation, if you're doing something like giving up dieting rules, that's novel. So you're going into a situation that you've never encountered before, so it does feel really scary. But that doesn't mean that it's wrong, right? So to Katie's point of that guilt, is it guilt or is it anxiety? Is this sense of like I'm doing something novel, I'm doing something new, so I feel really anxious and wrong about it, right? But it doesn't mean that you are actually bad, that your worth is affected by that. We had a question from user 665546776256667. Wish I could see your name. Maybe that's your name. I don't know. What are your thoughts on RODBT? Love RODBT, right, Katie? We love it. I love it. You love it.
For those who don't know what that is, that stands for radically open.
Yes.
Dialectical behavioral therapy.
Yes.
Therapists love acronyms.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. We have a question here on Facebook. I made a not feeling the best. Using behaviors. Anxiety is really high. And struggling with this whole idea of like eating helps calm the anxiety, right? So that's a thing that those in the recovery field will say is like, if you're anxious, try eating something, because we do get anxious when we are hungry. So check in with your mood. That's a great hunger cue. But I think that it doesn't feel like it's the right thing to do in the beginning, again, because it's novel, right? So keep in mind that if you've never done something before, right, like recovery, right, like giving up your eating disorder rules, you've never done that before, right, it's gonna feel hard for you. So Katy, how important is support when going through this process of like understanding your feelings and understanding the eating disorder voice?
Yeah, fantastic question. And I saw someone on TikTok had a question of how do I get my family to understand, because they don't understand that it's hard for me to eat. Building a support system outside of your treatment team is huge. Your treatment team, like your therapist, psychiatrist, dietitian, doctor, those are all great resources, but they aren't there, right? Like I had a client the other day tell me, love talking to you, but you're not there at 8 p.m. on a Tuesday when the shit hits the fan.
Right,
and
you
I'm
do
like,
great
right,
in therapy, and then you walk away and you're like, I can't do any of this that my therapist and I just talked about, right? Yes, that's why support is so important outside of therapy. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, family is usually like the first go-to, depending on like who you live with or where they are. I also have a lot of clients that they are not in touch with their family, or there was some type of toxic situation there, that in no way like excludes you from needing that outside support. So, I mean, I think family sessions honestly are extremely important, so that people know, because we don't know what we don't know, right? So lots of times what I have is like family making comments about someone's weight, or saying like, oh, you lost weight, you look so great, or oh, you're gaining weight, that's so good, or I'm gonna have donuts for breakfast and you should have one too.
Right.
These people don't know what's appropriate and what's not, because again, they don't filter things through that eating disorder brain. So what you and I might hear is like, oh, losing weight equals good, or gaining weight equals good, depending on what your goals are for treatment. But family and friends, boyfriends, grandma, like everybody needs to be coached by someone, and that's not your job.
Right.
Like, you shouldn't have to be having all of this turmoil and working so hard for recovery, and then also being like, I'll meet everyone where they're at, like I'll teach them everything. Like, you shouldn't have to have that role. I know a lot of you do, but
right. And,
yeah,
you don't know how to always teach the people in your life, because you don't know for yourself even, like you're kind of figuring it out too. So somebody to help with that. There's a question here in the Facebook group of being around family, dreading it, and difficulty with eating, especially if like there is somebody else in eating disorder recovery or somebody else living in diet culture. That's so hard. And to Katie's point, that's why we talk to our family. That's why we talk to or support, to communicate to them how um, to support you in those situations, and setting those boundaries so family knows, listen, we can't talk about diet, like we just can't do it, right? So is there a family member who you trust to shut that down, right? Because sometimes the aunt and the uncle or somebody may not get it. So who's like the closest person that you can, like, sit with and say, hey, if they start talking about this, can you help shut it down for me? Yes, support.
Super good point. And a lot of that, I think, is planning ahead, and your treatment team can help with that. My biggest fear when I was deep in my eating disorder was Thanksgiving, and having all the family come together and knowing like this is an entire day dedicated to food. And I eventually, like, as part of the treatment process, like, let my mom know, hey, I let her know ahead of time. I'm not planning on taking leftovers home, because that was a goal that me and my dietitian had. I'm going to be eating very mindfully that day, and I'm just going to try to make it just a meal. It's just a meal. It's not this huge deal. I'm like, I'm just eating lunch. That's all it is, and then I'm going to leave.
Yes, a plan.
I really had to, and I was so glad that I told her that ahead of time, because again, aunt, uncle, grandma, they were all pressuring me and asked me like probably 6 different times, like, why don't you want any leftovers? Was it not good? When are you getting leftovers? Let's pack you a plate. Let's do this. And eventually I was like, no, thank you. No, thank you. And then my mom was able to sweep in and just distract them and be like, what did you put in those green beans? And I was like, I'm leaving. Like, you need to have people on your team, because that's a night.
And there's a comment here, I hate Thanksgiving, and Thanksgiving, I think any kind of event with food is hard for anybody in recovery from an eating disorder. There's pressure, right? From, like, are they going to watch me? Are they going to judge me? Are they going to judge my recovery? Right? So it's okay to have a plan. It's okay to have a plan. I think that gets knocked a lot in recovery spaces. It can feel very diety to have a plan made, right? Because diet culture kind of stole this idea of planning your meals and, what you're going to eat throughout the day. But flexibility, as Katy said, to eating is being able to say, I'm going to go to this party and I'm going to eat what's there, and that's okay. I can eat throughout the day and take care of myself. I'm going to go to this party and eat, and I have a plan should I feel really anxious or uncomfortable. I prepared before going to that event a list of 5 to 10 things I can do or people to contact to help me get through that that event, that situation. Yes. Any other thoughts for that one, Katy? Tips on that?
No, that's honestly like the main advice that I would give to someone who's struggling, is to, like, again, get somebody on your side, whether it's a cousin, brother, just someone that you can trust with that information. Because doing it alone and thinking I can handle this on my own, or I should be able to do blank, 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 it's like, well, you've tried that and it's not giving you the support that you need. So I would really just encourage anyone struggling with that, like, please trust other people. If you have the resources to do that.
Yes, talk to somebody. And I think therapy and diagnosis is a privilege for people, but what I hear all the time is, am I sick enough? Am I sick enough? Am I sick enough? I'm going to just say this, and that's all we're going to say about the sick enough thing is, if you're asking, am I sick enough? You're sick enough. Like, normal, healthy people don't question how sick they are. They just are like, I don't feel right. These things are really hard for me. I'm not enjoying food. I feel uncomfortable. You're sick enough. Go get help for that. So I'm going to go to some questions here about, this is a good question. OCD and eating disorders, are they correlated? Katy?
So, yeah, for sure. Because already eating disorders, even without an OCD diagnosis, it's a lot of obsessing and it's a lot of compulsive behavior. So if you look at like obsessing about a calorie limit per day, or
right,
obsessing about like, well, I'm only allowed to chew this many bites, or I'm only allowed to like blah and blah and blah. Again, the rules, the rules, the rules. That's obsessive. Compulsion is when it's like, I am so uncomfortable if I don't do blank, I'm not okay. So that we see that a lot with like compulsive exercise or compulsive movement, where it's like, you know, I might see it in a client that's like pacing back and forth constantly, like throughout the day. Like even if they're like relaxing, watching TV, they're like, I cannot sit here. I have to be up, moving. And then if you do have a diagnosis of OCD on top of it, that I can only imagine, because I never had that diagnosis. That would almost, I think, be debilitating, where it's like you already have these thoughts telling you to do this.
Right.
And then that other part of your brain, like the OCD part, is going to make sure that you have followed through with all of the compulsions.
Right.
And that is honestly where med management is something I would totally recommend.
Yes.
And that's when I usually refer people to a psychiatrist, because I'm like, we need help, dude. Like,
yeah. Yes, meds are so great with, I always say, they're not the cure. We don't fix people as therapists. There's no fixing of things. But I think that medicine kind of just, I describe it as, it's like your brain is really loud and all these different conversations are happening in your brain. And then medicine just kind of like makes some of those voices go away. So it's less noisy in your head, which helps therapy, which helps school, which helps you ask for help, which helps you be able to communicate what you're needing and what you're wanting, right? And so I just wanted to talk about the med piece, because meds often are very stigmatized in not in mental health, but outside of mental health, we like to stigmatize medication, and it is so important to feeling better, and part of your treatment to take meds. And so sometimes people in recovery do need medication for things like OCD. Katy, another question that came up on TikTok was, what about eating disorders and trauma? And oh boy, are trauma and eating disorders really closely related to each other? I did a video. Did I do a video today? Maybe I didn't. Yes, I did. But trauma affects how we feel in our bodies. And so if you're feeling uncomfortable in your body, and we live in a world telling us we can change our bodies and feel better, woo, right? What a perfect disaster for somebody to be drawn to an eating disorder. So I think that, you know, you've got to treat the trauma and you got to treat the eating disorder. You can treat both and you can heal from both, right? But I think it's making sure you have somebody who knows trauma and knows eating disorders. Katy, I'm going to have you speak to this. I see a lot where somebody will be in trauma therapy, but the eating disorder stuff becomes, you know, they're using behaviors and they're having a hard time meeting their meal plan, and there's all kinds of body stuff that comes up. And so, you know, to have a person who gets eating disorders and gets the trauma, that person's going to help you be accountable and setting up a plan to manage behaviors while working through trauma reminders and symptoms and things. So Katy is also certified trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapist too, right? So Katy knows trauma and eating disorders. So what would you have to say about trauma and eating disorders?
Yeah, it is extremely linked. And usually the reasoning is, when we go through a trauma, especially like at a younger age, regardless of what the trauma was. And I want to say, by the way, lots of people hear me say the word trauma and they're like, oh, I was never like abused by a family member. And I'm like, that's not the only definition of trauma. If something felt traumatic for you,
right,
it's a trauma.
Right. Trauma so could be bullying.
Absolutely. It's like, I don't think people realize it's like, it could be bullying. It is going through like a national disaster, or not like a,
yes,
not
natural disaster. Yeah,
natural disaster. Thank you. Not a national.
And a national disaster. Mm-hmm.
We have those too.
Mm-hmm.
So, or like witnessing domestic violence.
Witnessing violence in your neighborhood, at your school. Mm-hmm.
Even like certain conversations I've been able to track back with certain clients that they're like, I will never forget, like when I was in the 5th grade, I asked my mom this and she laughed at me and I will never forget it.
Right.
And I'm like, that's traumatic.
A person's lack of response could be a trauma. Yes. So powerful to hear that.
And again, what trauma does to our brain is like take control away from us. It was something, we didn't say that to ourselves. We didn't do that to ourselves. We didn't cause like whatever violence that we're witnessing. And so it really creates like this out of control, scared feeling in us. And lots of times with the eating disorders, and this is what it was for me, like coming out of my childhood, was basically like, you can't tell me when to eat and you can't tell me when to not eat. You can't tell me when I throw away food and when I don't. You can't stop me from waking up at 3 a.m. and engaging in behaviors. And it became this very rebellious thing that I didn't really know was rebellious, because, you know, kids don't think about things like that. But yeah, they are very much linked, because eating disorders are a great way to get control back in your life.
Yep.
And eating disorders serve a purpose. That's why we have
100%. It's never just about the food and the weight loss. Like, it's about you're using it to mask or numb or avoid or manage some kind of emotional upset, something, you know, just icky that you experienced or have in your brain. So eating disorders, that's why they're so hard to let go of, right? If that's why it's not as simple as just eating something, right? Like, because it's more than just what you're eating. It's and the weight loss, it's the emotional, mental aspects and why we're using those things to feel better. So are
you looking at any, I'm trying to look at the YouTube like comments.
Oh, are there any?
I think so.
Yeah.
You might see it better on your side.
I don't see them. So what do you see?
Somebody on TikTok said, can you respond to the YouTube comments?
No. Yes, I can, but not live. So I should be able to, just not right now. I just don't, and I don't want to mess up what we got going on here, because I'll push a button. So I can go back and respond to YouTube comments. Yes, I'll do that. So I have a question. What does recovery look like? What behaviors will go away? What will my life look like? And I think this is going to be our last question, because I got to let Katie go back to her day. Oh man, here I'm feeling really torn about this question, because recovery is possible and you can live a life free, truly, of like thinking about food and weight. But that looks really different for every single person, and I don't want, eating disorders love to compare and compete, and I don't want to say this is the model of recovery, because I don't want you to judge your recovery against my version or somebody else's version of recovery. So I think it's asking yourself, what is living my best life, right? Like, what do I hope to be doing day to day? How do I want my days to feel? What kind of things do I want to be enjoying and working towards, right? And I think then recovery is doing those things, right? And not letting food and body stuff interfere with how you're living your life. Katie, thoughts on that? Recovery.
I completely agree with what you just said. I think it's, like one thing that, to answer the question pretty directly, where it's like, what behaviors will go away? That is so dependent on the person. For me personally, the thoughts are still there. um, that eating disorder brain, and again, I think of it like a filter where it's like any information that I hear, it like filters through that eating disorder brain. That filter is still there. So when I
Right.
hear someone like congratulate someone else on weight loss, it's that immediate like huh, like feeling. So I would never expect like that to go away. It's how I'm able to recover from that thought
Right.
and what behaviors I choose to do after that. That
Right.
to me is what recovery is, where it's like, okay, well, that's an interesting thought. And very quickly being able to be like,
Ooh.
that comment has nothing to do with me.
Right.
I don't believe that weight loss makes anyone better or worse. So to me, what recovery is where it's like hearing that same information, eating disorder brain interprets it and tells you it, but how quickly are you able to recover from that thought? Or like, does
Yes.
it, for me, it would be like, oh, that used to cause like a 3-day spiral. And now it's like a half-day spiral. Or I can always be like, oh, tomorrow's a new day. I won't feel this way tomorrow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
How
I would never.
quickly can you filter it from that like eating disorder space in your brain to what we call the healthy self part of your brain, right? Like, so it's okay. Yeah, it's okay if a thought comes up of, oh, I need to lose weight. Oh, right. Right. Oh, okay. Filter it to the healthy side of the brain where you're like, that's just an eating disorder thought. Okay, that's a symptom. It's all right. I don't have to do that, and you kind of can move on. Really, I think the second step to that, though, for people watching and listening to this, is how are you feeling when that thought came up? What was the emotion that you were experiencing? Go work on that emotion. Go take care of that anxiety, that fear of like that you're left out in some way, right? That's a need and an emotional need that you are allowed to take care of and nurture. So go take care of yourself if you're feeling something. So I think those thoughts can be information of how do I care for myself moving forward. Maybe that's what recovery looks like. So, my friends on TikTok, thanks for joining us. Our friends on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. There's so many social media sites. This is really fun. We started our conversation talking about COVID and how people lost access to support and help and people in their life, and recovery got really hard. And so but then people don't always have access to support. They don't always have access to therapists. Someone shared on TikTok how expensive it is to work with an eating disorder specialist, and it is expensive. I'm not even gonna lie. And so I love that all of these different social medias exist so that we can come on and just make this information more available to people, because not everybody, therapy is a privilege. So you still deserve to work and feel better and heal. So, yay. So, friends on TikTok, y'all are awesome. I'm so proud of all of you for bringing your snack, your lunch, your meal, eating challenge foods. Y'all were like, whoo, so strong and so amazing. So proud of you. Katy, any like last thoughts or comments?
Yeah, I think it's super important. I always have clients go and follow certain accounts on social media. So I know there's a bar at the bottom of here that lists like at Hey Dr. Stuff, and on Instagram if you want to follow me as well, because I have a lot of that like body positive and like challenging those eating disorder thoughts and messages around that.
Yes.
I'm at the weighty therapist. Weighty as in like my weight does not define my worth, I guess.
I love that.
So at the weighty therapist. And yeah, I think it's super important because especially if you're not in therapy right now or it's between therapy sessions, it is so important to still be getting like messages that help reprogram your brain. And I will urge you also to unfollow accounts that you know, like you guys know if something's helpful or not. So any like weight loss or diet plans or fitness, it's one of those things where I'm like, it's just temporary. Maybe you can follow it later.
Yep.
And not have those eating disorder thoughts control your entire day. For now, is that helpful? Is it recovery minded?
Right. Is it
So
recovery minded? Does this make me feel supported and encouraged in my recovery, or does this make me doubt myself and my recovery? Great question. Great advice. Yes, Katie, someone on TikTok, it's at the weighty, right? Say it again, Katie, your Instagram.
at the weighty therapist.
At the weighty therapist. You can also like message me, right? And I'll include her handle so you can find her directly. So thanks for joining us, everybody. Katie, thank you for hanging out with us. This is my favorite hour of the day. One of my favorite hours of the day. I shouldn't say it's the favorite, but one of them. So, all right, Katie, love you. Bye, y'all. Enjoy your day. All right, I'm gonna figure out how to sign off. So y'all are awesome. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks for having me.
I guess I'm just gonna do